All right, so I am a classically trained illustrator, and something I've been seeing a lot is when people print 3D models and then paint eyes on them, they get them all wrong. And I'm going to show you why they get them wrong. Okay, so when I was trained in school to be an illustrator, and I just drew some simple head shapes here to demonstrate, and you learn this a lot, maybe in high school art class or something, or maybe it's just something that you interpret, but people will very often draw what my illustrator instructor called Mexican hat in a bow ties. Okay, he called them Mexican in a bow ties, but he was referring to them in the sense that it was a Mexican hat in a boat. So it's almost like this is the shape of the boat from a top view, and then a lot of people will draw, the iris, and then they'll draw a pupil in the middle. Okay, and it's like perfectly centered. Okay, it doesn't matter how big or small you make it, it just looks wrong because it basically looks like a zonked out zombie. Okay, and that's not how you draw an eye. This is how you do it. Okay, so what you need to do is realize and understand a little bit of anatomy. Your eyeball is actually bigger than the eye opening itself. Okay, so your actual eyeball is not just the width of this opening. Your actual physical eyeball is like much bigger. I mean, if you look at a skeleton, you notice that the eye openings are actually quite big behind there. Okay, and then what you're seeing, of course, is a lot of the white of the eye around, and then you see the iris and the pupil. So a much better way to draw eyes, very simply, is to have it such that if you were drawing a circle, the eyelid up here is actually going to cover the upper portion, maybe 25% of the pupil. Okay, so again, look over here. Okay, if I was to draw a complete circle, it would go all the way over. You see that the eyelid is covering that. Here the eyelid is not covering the pupil. The pupil is completely exposed. So again, back over here, if I draw the eyelid, the eyelid is covering the top of the pupil. Okay, and then you can draw your sorry, that was the iris. It's covering the top of the iris. The pupil can now be drawn in, and you can see, again, if I was to draw the whole eyeball, it's actually, underneath that upper eyelid. Okay, and another thing that people tend to forget about is just eyeshadow. Okay, so your eyelid sticks out, by whatever, a few millimeters, and it covers your eyeball, and so it causes a shadow, and on top of that you're going to have eyelashes. So when you're painting a minifigure or whatever, a little statue, if you're painting the whole thing flesh, you want to get the underside of this eyelid to be a bit of that darker pink color, or darker kind of flesh color, to create the illusion that it's sticking out, which it is, and casting a shadow on the eyes. And that'll just create a much more natural eye. So now when you've got your eyelid drawn, and you've kind of got the shadow or whatever for the nasal area, it's going to look a lot more realistic. And then, of course, I would go back in with that same color, maybe a shade or two less, and then do the bottom of the eyelid. Because, again, the bottom of the eye, the top of that lower eyelid sticks out. Okay? One more thing that you can do is when you're painting eyes is don't use pure white on the eyes. Okay, it's very rare that people have completely pure white eyes. When you see that in fashion magazines and stuff like that, or photographs, a lot of times that's photoshopped. Even teeth, people whiten the teeth and they make them a lot more, whatever, this is the ideal person, this is what they look like. But the fact of it is you should use a bit of an off-white, and then in reality you should use a tiny little bit of pink or a little bit of off-white shading on the sides and corner of the eye, right? Because you got that little pink, sort of blobby bit. I don't know the medical term or physical term for it, but there's whatever, your tear duct glands and all that kind of stuff that's in the corner of the eye. All of that creates shading and depth. Okay, so now if you look at the difference between the two, that's a huge difference, right? Even if you're to add eyelids to this guy over here, it's still not going to look right. He's going to look like super shocked, right? That something's like, oh my God, that truck just flipped over in the distance. Doesn't look right, okay? So you can have this guy over here, and it looks much more natural, okay? So it's just a simple shading trick. If you watch, for example, Sideshow collectibles or something like that, a lot of the tutorials they have, they do a great job of explaining these sort of principles, and they're just classic painting and illustration principles. Another thing you might want to do here is, if you're painting a flesh color, is accent the bottom of the eyelid. So this is, or sorry, the eye brow, and this would be like the eye shadow area, right? So you want to maybe paint something, brush in a couple of washes underneath there to give that shading. And so now, just like even with this sketch, it's like, look at the two. It's a huge difference, just in terms of adding a little bit more realism to how an eye would be shaded. Okay, so I hope that helps you out. Just a simple trick. But people have been using it for hundreds of years, so I hope that helps you out. Thanks.